In 1876, 40 clay tablets from Nineveh were shipped to London and classified as the oldest medical text in human history. For more than a century, scholars believed they contained nothing more than ancient diagnoses and treatments. But in 2016, one researcher noticed something strange hidden among hundreds of entries. 7 passages did not fit the pattern. At first glance, the difference seemed insignificant. A subtle grammatical variation buried within thousands of lines of cuneiform text. Yet according to the researcher, those 7 entries were not describing diseases at all. They were identifying people. The tablets belong to the Sakiku series, a collection excavated from the library of King Ashurbanipal and now housed within the British Museum. Historians traditionally viewed Sakiku as a diagnostic handbook. Its entries followed a familiar structure. If a person displays a certain symptom, then a specific outcome or diagnosis follows. Simple, predictable, medical. But while digitizing portions of the text, French epigrapher Émile Zuber noticed that 7 entries used a completely different construction. Instead of saying, if a man has this symptom, they declared, the one who has this mark. The distinction appears minor, but linguistically it changes everything. One describes a patient. The other identifies a category. Curious, Zuber compared the wording against thousands of administrative texts from ancient Mesopotamia. According to his analysis, the same grammatical structure appeared most often in inventories and classification records. Lists used to sort animals, offerings, and designated individuals, not diagnoses, identifications. His findings received little attention outside specialist circles. Yet the implications were unusual enough to raise an unsettling question. If these entries were not describing illnesses, what exactly were they recording? Each of the 7 passages focuses on a different observable trait. More intriguingly, each concludes with a designation that Zuber interpreted as something closer to marked for offering than medical outcome. And each trait corresponds to a phenomenon that modern science can observe but is not fully explained. The first entry concerns the one who wakes in the 4th watch. According to the text, this individual repeatedly awakens during the hours before dawn. The passage does not classify the condition as sickness. Instead, it associates the experience with contact from a supernatural force. Ancient Egyptians recorded a remarkably similar belief. Certain texts describe the deepest hours of the night as a moment when boundaries between worlds become unusually thin. Today, spontaneous awakening between roughly 3 and 4 a.m. is widely reported. Sleep researchers have documented the phenomenon across multiple populations. Hormonal changes, stress responses, and circadian rhythms may contribute to it, yet many cases remain difficult to explain completely. The second marker describes the one whose skin writes without a stylus. The image is vivid. Lines appear across the skin despite no visible injury. The marks rise, linger briefly, and disappear. Modern medicine recognizes a condition called dermatographia, sometimes referred to as skin writing. In affected individuals, even light pressure can produce raised welts that resemble writing or drawn patterns. The condition is real. Its exact cause remains uncertain. To ancient observers, however, such markings may have appeared deeply mysterious. The third entry references the one who hears the voice without a mouth. Ancient Mesopotamian texts associated such experiences with contact from unseen entities. Similar descriptions appear throughout religious and mystical literature across many cultures. Modern readers may recognize parallels with tinnitus, the perception of sound without an external source. Millions of people experience ringing, buzzing, or tones that seem to originate from nowhere. Despite decades of research, tinnitus remains one of the most common neurological conditions lacking a universally effective cure. The fourth entry may be the most controversial. It describes the one whose blood does not match the clay. Mesopotamian myths often portrayed humanity as being formed from clay mixed with divine blood. Within that symbolic framework, blood represented the original template of human creation. Some researchers and alternative historians have connected this passage to Rh-negative blood. Rh-negative individuals lack a specific protein found on red blood cells. The trait is relatively uncommon worldwide and distributed unevenly across populations. Mainstream genetics explains Rh-negative blood through inheritance and evolutionary processes, yet the subject has long attracted speculation because of its unusual characteristics and geographic concentrations. Whether the Sakiku intended any connection is impossible to know, yet the resemblance has fueled decades of debate. The fifth marker concerns the one who sees the place where he has not walked. The passage describes recurring visions or dreams involving locations unfamiliar to the dreamer. Dream records from ancient Egypt contain similar references. Some texts interpreted unfamiliar places appearing in dreams as destinations rather than symbols. Modern neuroscience has documented recurring dream environments that individuals report revisiting repeatedly over many years. Brain imaging studies show that regions associated with spatial navigation can become highly active during these experiences. Why certain dream landscapes feel so real remains an open question. The sixth entry is perhaps the strangest. It identifies the one whose body rejects the field. According to the text, unusual effects occur around such individuals. Lamps dim. Divination tools behave unpredictably. Instruments produce contradictory results. Comparable ideas appear in traditions far removed from Mesopotamia. Ancient Indian sources describe people possessing unusual energetic influence capable of disrupting ritual objects. Today, stories persist about individuals who claim electronic devices malfunction around them. Reports include watches stopping unexpectedly, batteries draining unusually fast, and screens flickering in their presence. Scientists remain skeptical of many such claims, yet the stories continue to surface across cultures and generations. Then comes the seventh and shortest entry, the one who remembers what was not lived. No elaborate description follows, only the assertion that certain people possess knowledge predating their own lives. The concept appears in numerous traditions. Hindu texts speak of impressions carried across existence. Other cultures tell stories of children recalling places, names, and events they should have no way of knowing. Few researchers explored the topic more extensively than psychiatrist Ian Stevenson. Over several decades, he documented thousands of reports involving children who appeared to possess unusually detailed memories of deceased individuals. Supporters consider his work remarkable. Critics argue alternative explanations remain possible. Either way, the cases remain among the most debated subjects in anomalous research. What fascinated Zuber was not any single marker, it was the pattern. Each trait appears within a measurable portion of the population. Some are relatively common, others are extraordinarily rare. Taken individually, they can be explained, or at least partially explained, through medicine, psychology, genetics, or neuroscience. Taken together, however, they form something resembling a classification system, and that is exactly how the 7 entries are written, not as treatments, not as warnings, but as identifiers. Zuber's interpretation never sparked a major academic controversy. There were no public battles, no dramatic rebuttals, no widespread media coverage. Instead, the theory largely faded into obscurity, yet the mystery remains. Why would a medical handbook suddenly switch vocabulary for exactly 7 entries? Why describe conditions using language associated with classification rather than diagnosis? And why do those same entries focus on experiences that continue to generate questions thousands of years later? The answers may be completely ordinary. Ancient scribes were human, and inconsistencies appear in historical texts all the time. Or perhaps the 7 passages preserve fragments of a forgotten system of categorization whose original purpose has long been lost. That possibility is what keeps researchers returning to the tablets, because the most unsettling detail is not what the entries say, it is what they fail to say. They never explain what happens after identification. They never describe a treatment. They never provide a cure. They simply record the marks, one after another, as though someone, somewhere, only needed to know who possessed them. The Sakiku tablets still exist today, preserved in museum collections far removed from the world that created them. Thousands of years have passed since the clay was pressed by the hands of ancient scribes. Yet the 7 entries continue to stand apart from everything surrounding them. Hundreds of passages discuss illness. Only 7 discuss something else. Whether those 7 markers represent misunderstood medical observations, symbolic spiritual concepts, or evidence of a classification system now forgotten, one fact remains unchanged. Someone considered them important enough to preserve, important enough to copy, important enough to carry across centuries, and perhaps most intriguingly of all, important enough to count. The tablets never reveal who was doing the counting. They never reveal why. and they never reveal what the final number was supposed to mean.